Today we're going to be covering lesson 9.5, which is still solving the quadratic equations, only now we have the quadratic formula. So this is going to be our method number 4, and this is our last method as well. So you might be kind of sick of me showing you different methods, but the quadratic formula is actually one of the most commonly used formulas because it doesn't matter what kind of a quadratic I give you. So if you take a look at some of these ones just on this page right here, notice this one probably wouldn't be too bad because you notice how you have an even number in the middle and you notice how there's no number out front. But look at this one. Do you see how it's that odd number again? It's going to be a little harder. Look at this one, it has a negative out front. Ooh, look at number 5. If you take a look at number 5, do you see how there's this coefficient of 3? If we were to try to divide off the 3, so if we were to try to divide this entire equation by 3, man, we'd have x squared minus 1/3 x minus 2/3 equals 0. Oh, could you imagine how difficult this would be? You guys already hate fractions. Could you imagine having to complete the square now? So the quadratic formula is one of the most commonly used methods in solving a quadratic because it works with everything. Now, the only negative to this one is it's a big formula, okay? So let me write it down. We have x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So notice this is a big formula. It's definitely a big formula, but I would really work on putting this to memory, okay? Now, you might be wondering, what do all these letters go to? Well, remember, they go to a quadratic in standard form. So ax squared plus bx plus c. So all of these numbers, or all of these letters, the B, the A, and the C, they all go to the numbers in your quadratic. And so you'll see me kind of pull those out. But that's the numbers that we're going to replace in here. Okay? So this is the quadratic formula. Work on putting it to memory, whether that's write it on a sticky note and put it somewhere that you're going to see it over and over. Make a note card, but that is a big part of the field of mathematics. Now, part of the quadratic formula is this piece right here, this underneath piece. So this underneath piece, this b squared minus 4ac, is called the discriminant. Okay, so you can see it right there. The discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, no radical, just the piece under. This tells you how many solutions you might have. So sometimes people like to run the discriminant first because what if it's a no solution? What if you go through all this work and you find out that it doesn't even cross? See that one? See how it doesn't even cross? Well, that'd be a lot of work to find out there's no solution. So sometimes people will ask you about the discriminant. So, and again, you can always look at the original copy of the notes if this is hard to see. But if the discriminant is greater than 0, so if you're greater than 0, that means you're going to cross in 2 places. So you're going to have 2 solutions. If your discriminant comes out equal to 0, that means you're only going to have 1 solution. See how it just touches the axis? And if your discriminant comes out less than 0, now what does less than 0 really mean? Doesn't less than 0 mean that it comes out negative? If you come out negative, if you try to take the square root of -9, can you even do that? Wouldn't you get a no solution? So that's what they're telling you right here. That if the discriminant comes out to be negative, then you know it has to be a no solution. So the discriminant is part of the quadratic formula. It's just a teeny tiny little piece of it. So oftentimes what you'll see in problems is sometimes they'll ask you to determine the number of real solutions. Really what they're asking you to do is calculate the discriminant. That's what they want you to do. So let's go ahead and give that a try. Let's figure out how many solutions the C would even have. Now remember, this is our A, our B, and our C, okay? So the discriminant is going to be just this piece right here. It's going to be B squared minus 4AC. So I'm going to go B squared minus 4 times A times C. Now be very careful right here. Do you notice how I put it in parentheses? If you don't put it in parentheses on the graphing calculator, it's going to give you the wrong answer. So please make sure that you put it in parentheses. And now I'm going to type the rest of it in. And so my discriminant comes out to be a positive 48. So if this is a positive, if this is greater than 0, if I go right back up here, notice that tells me I'm going to have 2 solutions. And so that's what they're looking for, okay? Sometimes they'll also ask you for what is the discriminant as well. So sometimes they'll want both of those 2 numbers, okay? So why don't you pause it here and why don't you try 2 and 3 on your own? All right, number 2. I've got my A, my B, and my C. And so I'm going to go B squared minus 4 times A. Wait a minute. What is A? A is right here. It's just a 1. So A and then C. So I have 36 minus 36. Isn't 36 minus 36 0? Well, that's okay. Look up here. If it equals 0, that means it's just going to be touching. So that just means there's only one solution. And that's my answer. Okay? Now, if they wanted, I could find out what this solution was, but right now they're just asking me to determine the number of solutions. They don't actually want me to tell you what the solutions are. They just want to know how many there would be. So let's do this last one. We've got our A, we've got our B, and we've got our C. And so we're going to do B squared. And notice I'm still putting it in parentheses. This one actually wouldn't matter because it's positive, but it's just a good habit to put that front one in parentheses. Minus 4 times A, remember there's a 1 out front, and then times C. So we have, 9 minus 32, and so we get negative 23 is my discriminant. And so, wait a minute, isn't this negative? Negative means no solution. So if we were to graph this one, and let me just again pull up Desmos because it's easy to show you. So if we were to go x squared plus 3x plus 8, do you notice how the graph never actually even crosses? So it makes sense that my answer was a no solution because I can't have a negative underneath that square root, okay? So this is how you use the discriminant. If you ever hear the word discriminant, that's what they're talking about. Now, if we go down below here, they just want us to solve using the quadratic formula. So we're going to use the discriminant. It's just going to be part of our formula. So let's go ahead and just start. We've got our A, our B, and our C. Now I'm not going to probably be able to show both of these at the same time just due to the projection, but here is the formula again. So if you need to pause the video here and copy it down, that might be helpful, okay? But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take and I'm going to use this formula, and every time I see these letters, I'm going to replace them with the numbers from this equation, okay? So I'm going to go x equals opposite b plus or minus, now that might look kind of weird, but I'll show you how to do it in just a second, the square root, now we're going to use the discriminant, b squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. So let's grab our calculator and let's work out this discriminant. And notice I get a 36. So that's just all of this worked out. So this part right here, all of that typed in came out to be this number. Okay, so it's just putting it all together, simplifying it, and then 2 times 1. All right, now what is the square root of 36? Isn't it just 6? So I get x equal 10 plus or minus 6 over 2. But remember, whenever we take the square root, don't we have to do plus or minus? That's why the plus or minus is there. The plus or minus is there for the square root. So it's kind of nice because that way you can't forget it. Now you're going to have two separate problems. You're going to have 10 plus 6 divided by 2, and you're going to have 10 minus 6 divided by 2. So that's 16 divided by 2, and that's 4 divided by 2, and there are my two solutions. And again, if we want to go to Desmos, we can check it out. So what do we have here? Minus 10x plus 16. And notice my answer is 2, and it's 8. But did you notice I didn't use a calculator for this problem at all? I didn't grab my calculator. Well, I guess I sort of did. I did it for this one, but I probably could have done it by hand if I needed to. But do you notice I didn't really need the calculator for much? So a lot of people like the quadratic because if you're not allowed to use a calculator for, whatever reason, if you're on an SAT, then the quadratic equation is really, really helpful for that. So why don't you give number 5 a try? Why don't you try the quadratic on number 5? All right, I hope you have tried it. Let me just tell you the answers, and then again, I'll work it out. But for those of you who pause the video here and want to try it on your own, so I came out with a 1, and I came out with about a negative 0.6 repeating. Okay, that would be my two solutions. So if you feel comfortable with that, there are 2 more problems on the other page. So if you want to give them a try, you can. If you feel comfortable, you may move to the homework and go ahead and try those. But I definitely want to go through a few more so that you can see it done for any of you who are still kind of a little unsure of how this thing works. Okay? So, number 5. A, B, and C. And so I'm going to run my formula here. I do opposite B plus or minus, now my discriminant, b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. You notice how I had to put the 3 because that's the a. All right, let's go ahead and work this out. Let's do our discriminant. Just typing in what's underneath, just simply the underneath piece, and I get a 25. So all I've done is typed this part into my calculator, and I got this number right there. Okay, so it's just kind of cleaning it up a little bit. Now 2 times 3 is 6. And so again, I know the square root of 25. I know that's plus or minus 5 because notice they already have that plus or minus for me. And then there's the 6. And so I have 2 problems now. I have 1 plus 5 over 6, and I have 1 minus 5 over 6. So it kind of splits them into 2 problems. So I have 6 divided by 6, and then I have negative 4 divided by 6, which is really negative 2/3. So if you want to keep that as a fraction, or you can go as a decimal, that would be the same 2 answers I have up here. Okay? So if you feel a little bit better now that I've walked through 2 problems and you want to give another one a try on your own, I've got 2 more problems here. You're welcome to try both. You can try one, whatever makes you feel more comfortable, okay? So go ahead and pause it. All right, if you've paused it, on number 6, I came out with a no solution. And on number 7, I came out with just one answer. So these are kind of different. So if you want to go through these, then let's go ahead and give them a try. Now, do you notice how this one, the 13 is on the other side? We need to move this 13 back over to this side. The quadratic formula wants everything on one side. So this is a little different. This is almost ready for completing the square. So this is how the quadratic needs it to be. And then we're going to use our A, our B, and our C. Okay? And so here we go. We're going to go opposite B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So remember, my A value is just a 1 out there, okay? So it's really, really important that you have this formula written down on the top of your paper, on an index card, anywhere, but you're going to need to know this formula. All right, let's go ahead and let's work out the discriminant. So we're going to do the piece that's underneath. Whoa, I get a negative. Let me write that down for a minute and just think about that. So now I'm just going to work out the bottom. All right, I have a negative 16 right here. Negative 16. How do I take the square root of a negative number? I can't. And we saw that on the other page, where if you get a negative underneath, that means there's not going to be a solution. So notice we have, this comes out to be a no solution. And once again, go to Desmos and type it in. Just make sure you have to type it like this. You can't type it in from the original because it doesn't understand that part. But if you type it in, it'll give you a visual of what it's going to look like. So plus 6x plus 13. And do you notice how it doesn't cross? See how there's a gap right here? Then we know we've done it correct. Okay? All right. Last one. Notice this is a little tricky because look at that 4x. I definitely need to move it over to the other side, but when I move it over, I actually want to put it in order. I want to put it right in between. Notice when I did this one, I put it at the end because it was a constant. Do you see how this one is a variable? So you got to make sure that you're putting it in order. So I'm going to go minus 4x plus 1. See, I just kind of slipped it in the middle, and then I'm going to set it equal to 0. So now I have my A, my B, and my C, and I'm going to go ahead and run my formula. So opposite B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C. And then it's going to be all over 2A. All right, that looks good. Let's work out this underneath piece again. We're going to work this out and we'll put it right here. Okay, so we're just doing the discriminant. So I'm typing in the underneath. What? 0? I get a 0? All right, hold on. 2 times 4 is 8. Can I have a 0 underneath? Can the discriminant become a 0? Sure. If the discriminant is a 0, that just means you're only going to have one answer. Okay? So what's the square root of 0? 0, right? So do I really need to split this into 2 separate problems? Because what's 4 plus 0? And what's 4 minus 0? Isn't that really just the same thing? So don't I just get 4 over 8, which is the same thing as 1/2? Remember, that was the original answer I told you at the beginning. Let's take a look and see what this one looks like. Now remember, we have to type it in with everything on one side. But again, it just looks kind of funny because you're like, I only have one answer. So let's bring up Desmos here, and let's just type our last one in. So 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. And look at that. Do you see how it just touches in that one location? Okay. Now again, some of you might really, really like Desmos, and I agree. This is a fantastic website. I like it myself, but we're not allowed to use it in class. And so we have to go with the methods that we have. And so the quadratic formula is used a lot in higher level math. So it's very important that you understand it, that you know the formula and you know how it works. And if you notice, again, look at how much work I have, and that's just 2 problems right here. It's a lot of work, but stay organized and go slow and you'll get it.